Hi, I'm Jenny. I am a parent to Eleanor, and Eleanor has cyclic vomiting syndrome. And I'm here today to just tell you a little bit about our experience, and also I'm hoping maybe some of the things that I wish I knew early on might be helpful to you, even though everybody's story is pretty different. So, how it started, when my daughter was around 5 years old, it's generally kids who have cyclic vomiting syndrome generally get sick somewhere between like 4 and 7 years old. I think Eleanor's first episode was actually when she was 3 years old, but we didn't know it at the time. When she was around 5 years old, she began vomiting about once a week. It was the summer before she was starting kindergarten. And she would vomit around 3 or 4 a.m. a couple of times and then sleep for a few hours. And then she would wake up fine, which was confusing as a parent because I was like, oh, she must be sick. So I would make her lay down or stay on the couch and watch cartoons and rest. But she would wake up and want pancakes and to play with her toys. And now that I know everything about cyclic vomiting, you're probably as a parent thinking, yep, that sounds familiar. About a month into her kindergarten year, she had her first what I would call real episode. She woke up at 3 a.m. vomiting. Um, and this is pretty typical for kids who have cyclic vomiting. Now I know this, I didn't know it back then. She vomited, and then like 45 minutes later, she vomited again, and then 30 minutes, 20 minutes. And, by the time I put her in the car to go to the ER, she was vomiting literally every 2.5 minutes. And as you know, once you're vomiting that much, you're not actually, nothing's really coming up except bile and spit. And she went into what I now know is called a conscious coma. That's what the I don't know, the popular cyclic vomiting community calls it. She wasn't opening her eyes. She was just grunting. She wasn't really talking to me anymore. Her whole body was limp just because it was so hard to vomit that much. Took her to the hospital. They said, oh, she probably has food poisoning. It looks like food poisoning. They gave her some Zofran, which we all know. If you have cyclic vomiting syndrome, you all know Zofran. She felt a lot better, slept and rested for 2 days, and I just left it like that. And then 2 weeks later, it happened again, and 2 weeks later, it happened again. So something that I wanted to talk about is it usually takes about 2 years for people to get diagnosed with cyclic vomiting syndrome because it looks like so many other things. We got really lucky and figured it out pretty quickly, which brings me to, these are my tips and hints that I came up with. The first one is, I would say you are your child's biggest advocate. So if you can find a doctor who appreciates you being your child's advocate, a doctor who is a learner, who's someone who's curious, someone who wants to do some digging, because cyclic vomiting, thank God, 10 years later, it's so much more known now than it used to be, but it's still new as far as like the big, wide, scale of things in the world. So it's hard sometimes. You really have to find a doctor who will work with you, and you are the advocate. And I wish I knew that better earlier on. The next thing I have is lifestyle changes, sort of. So what it means is, especially little kids, it's very similar to migraines. It's a migraine variant. It's a brain gut disorder. So they get triggered by things like tiredness, hunger, heat, viruses. So what you can do as a parent is make sure they have an early bedtime. Kids with CVS need more sleep than other kids. So it's kind of a serious thing, like making sure they have an early bedtime, making sure that they don't get overheated. If it's a 90-degree day, that's probably not a great day for them to be outside. And this goes back to being their greatest advocate. You as a parent just have to be, I know it's weird, I know it's different, but this is what's going to keep them healthy. They need snacks every couple of hours. You can't go 5 hours between meals. All those little things will really help them. And then the reason I said lifestyle changes, sort of, is because I had a blog, like when all this began, I started a blog, and now she's our friend. But this young woman named Megan, she found my blog because she was in her early 20s, and she had been struggling with CVS for years, and she was just feeling sort of sad and withdrawn, like not feeling like she had a lot of connections. she found the blog, she was reading it, and she left this really long, beautiful post because I had posted about the kids and I and my husband going out to Colorado, and knowing that it was probably going to cause Eleanor to have an episode, a vomiting episode, and it did. And that I was kind of like struggling with, how do you balance holding your kids back from hard activities versus, you know, making these great memories, as because they're children and they deserve to have these wonderful memories, but knowing it could cause an episode. And it was like, it's a really hard thing to balance. And she wrote this beautiful response about, you know, you're doing a great job. This is exactly what you have to do. And she said, when I think back to my childhood, what I remember is climbing the mountains and going for hikes in Colorado, or like going to the birthday parties, or waking up Christmas morning. I'm not holding on to the memories of vomiting later that night. Like, that's not the part that defines me. The part that defines me is these wonderful childhood memories. So lifestyle changes are key to helping your kids stay well. But I also think it's really important not to hold back, not to change your entire life, and not to do fun adventures, because that's what shapes them as humans, and their illness should really be secondhand. Connect, but don't predict. So I think that for me as a parent, one of the biggest, best things you can possibly do, the thing that helped me the most, was connecting with other parents. There's so many ways to do that, but it really changes everything. You feel like you're less alone. The parents who've been through it before you can give you tips and hints about if you have to go to the hospital, what to bring, how to handle all those situations. Mostly they tell you, you've got this, you're doing great. It just changes everything when you feel like you're less alone. So connecting with parents is huge, but I get hesitant or worry a little bit when I see parents on social media or messaging groups or discussion groups asking for real specifics. So like, how much of this, you know, supplement do you guys think my kids should take? Or at what age do you think their CVS will turn into migraines, which does happen for a chunk of kids with CVS. It becomes migraines unless the CVS part. But the concern is like my friend, who's also the director of the Cyclic Vomiting Syndrome Association, she always says, if you've met someone with cyclic vomiting, you've met someone with cyclic vomiting. Like, one person is just one person. Everybody's story is a little bit different. And although there's trends, each kid is going to have their own, their own story. So my daughter is now 15 and she has not grown out of cyclic vomiting. And I was told by a lot of parents, oh, by the time she's 12 or 13, she'll probably grow out. For us, that hasn't been our story. So I just think connecting with parents is really important, but don't predict what your child's journey is going to be like just based on what their experience is. Be ready for change and then more change. A pediatrician, we also switched pediatricians early on and found a pediatrician who had some patients with CVS, and that really helped because she had experience with it. But she said to me one time, when there was a couple of years when Eleanor's CVS was pretty much out of control, it was really bad. It was a hard time for her. And she said to me, once you get a handle on cyclic vomiting syndrome, something changes. And that is really the truth. We thought we would figure out a medicine, it was working, it was helping, and then it wasn't. And we would have to change to something else, which also ties in with, like, you can't predict exactly what's going to happen, but be open to change. At one point, for I'm not sure, like almost 3 years, Eleanor was eating chocolate pudding before bed with raw cornstarch mixed in, and it really helped her. She was very malnourished because of all the vomiting, and she needed the sugars to stay in her stomach overnight. But it's like this weird, quirky thing that worked for my child, and then eventually it changed and she didn't need it anymore. So be open to the change and trying different things. The next one is mental health is as important as physical health. The reason I wanted to talk about that is because I think that as parents, we get really, really focused on the sickness because it's scary and it's hard. It's hard to see your kid in so much pain and you don't want it to happen. You want to do anything you can to make it not happen again and again. So we kind of go into like hyperattention mode of the illness. And sometimes I think we can lose their mental health in the process by accident. We don't mean it. So now that Eleanor's older, she's been able to share stuff with me about, you know, like there were years when for months I would be saying things like, how's your head today? Do you have a headache? Do you have a stomach ache? How's your energy? Where's your nausea? If you had to say 1 through 10, where is it now? Because I was constantly trying to figure out, oh, does she need to go to bed earlier? Or can we go play at the park this afternoon or whatever? But what it did is it made her feel different. It made her feel isolated. It kind of made her hyper aware of her body. So she was constantly doing this thing called body scanning, like I don't know if I have a headache. Now that you mention it, I kind of do have a headache, I guess. And so my biggest piece of advice is that their mental health should come before concentrating on their chronic illness. So, you know, noticing my daughter is really into reading and she's a creative writer and she's really passionate about social justice in the world, like noticing those things and talking about those things as much or more preferably than the illness. The illness should come second, because in the big scheme of things, that's what they're going to remember when they grow up, is who they are and not what this illness did to them. Okay, this is the association that I got involved with. We got involved because it's not super far from where we live, but if I was a new parent, or even not a new parent, but I was a parent of someone with CVS, I would definitely recommend going there. They're great. They have all kinds of stuff about what to bring to the hospital, other parenting groups, support groups. They have speakers all the time. They're really helpful. It's like 90% volunteer run, and you can jump in and volunteer and do anything you want. And that's another good way to feel connected to other people who are going through what your family is going through. There's a couple of pictures. That middle picture is from our walk. The CVSA they haven't done it for a couple of years because of the pandemic, but they do a run walk, and that was the first way that we started meeting other families. Okay, and the last thing is, where are we now? So Eleanor just started high school, and it's a really amazing, wonderful thing. Last year, she went to this pain rehab program. They're all over the United States, but the ones that we went to was in Minnesota at Mayo Clinic. And I would say once your kid gets a little older, if you can do something like that, it's super helpful. If not, also a therapist is great. But what they really did was they taught a whole group of teenagers about like how to live with chronic illness. So it doesn't heal anything. It didn't stop the fact that she has CVS, but now she has all these great skills and all these great tools that she uses to get through her day, and she's doing amazing. It was kind of life changing for her. And then the last thing I want to say to parents is just that it really truly does get better. As they get older, they're able to identify, like, I'm tired, I should go lay down. I haven't drank enough water today. They can sort of self-regulate better, and they can speak more about what they need. And it really truly gets better as they get older, and reach out to other people. And I think that will really help you feel supported as well. Okay, that's all I have to say. Thank you.